Hello, thank you for joining me for another episode of 177 Nations of Tasmania. In this episode, I'm talking with Eri from Japan. Now, Eri lived and travelled in a number of countries before she came to Australia with the intention to work, and she always wanted to come to Tasmania. She's a qualified dance psychotherapist, now living in Hobart with a Tasmanian husband. So, to find out how all that happened, please listen on. Yeah.
I entered through Perth. The first thing I noticed was the vastness of the land. Even I was in the city, but the street is much wider, and I don't know. It was just so wide. That was the first impression that I got about this country. I was always interested in the nature and the wildlife aspects of Tasmania. So when I decided to come to Australia, I definitely wanted to make sure that I come down to Tasmania. I came here in 2015 on a working holiday visa. And I stayed in mainland doing farm work, sorts of things for a while. And then I came down to Tasmania.
Why did you want to come to Australia in the first place? Was there any particular attraction?
Yeah, I never actually thought I would come to Australia before. I don't know why, but it didn't really occur to me. But I went to India at the beginning of 2015 for 3 months. I was traveling alone. And then I kept on meeting really lovely Aussies. And also people told me that whoever I was meeting in India, international people were telling me that Australia is actually a good place to earn money, to save up money.
Okay.
So my initial intention of coming here was to work and to save up a little bit and to go back to India to learn a bit of dancing in India.
So was your intention to travel all around Australia, or was it always your plan to come to Tasmania in particular?
I definitely wanted to come to Tasmania. But initially, I think my focus was finding a farm work or any kind of work and earn some money and get enough money to go back to India to continue learning dance.
And so obviously you've stayed.
Yes.
How did that happen?
So I met my husband in 2016. When I was backpacking in mainland, chasing farm work opportunities, I started meeting really nice, lovely people from all over the world. And I started really enjoying, and I started discovering how diverse and interesting this country was. So I started thinking, probably I could stay a bit longer and a bit longer. So, and then I came to Tasmania, and then after a while I met my husband, so changed my whole plan.
So how did you meet exactly?
I actually met his parents first,
which
is very unusual.
Yeah.
Yes, I was staying at someone's house for 2 months actually, and this lady and my husband's parents were good friends. And one day, so the lady whose house I was staying at took me to a lunch at their friend's place, which was my husband's parents' place in Dodges Ferry.
Okay.
So I went there and met his parents, and we got along well. And they were really lovely. Yeah, just found out they've got a son who's single, living in Hobart.
Okay.
And I think there were a little bit of planning behind the scene by two mums.
Okay.
That's what I suspect. But yeah, so we met a little bit later, and we actually started off as a housemaid.
Okay. Where was the point where you decided, I'm going to commit to staying here?
I think when the relationship became serious, and I don't think there was any particular time where I felt, that's it, I'm staying here. But it just happened like that. I just followed the flow. I think I just trusted whatever came into my path, I think. Yeah, so it was sort of natural. It was natural to stay here a bit longer.
Yeah.
But then we actually, we got married in 2017 in June. just before my second year working holiday visa was expiring. And then after my visa expired, we traveled Asia for 2 months. We went to Indonesia, Nepal, Malaysia and Singapore. And then we went to Japan and we stayed there for 1 year and a half. No, he
been to Japan
never
before?
lived in abroad before. So it was a very big shock and challenge for him.
Yeah. So there must have been a bit of culture shock for him in Japan. How did you help him adjust
I felt
to the
quite
new culture?
helpless, to be honest, because I felt it was very challenging for both of us. And for my husband, it was, as I said, it was first time for him to be in a foreign country. And especially that, the country he came was such a different country from where he's from. So he felt like he was cut off from all the familiarities in life. So he struggled a lot. He didn't speak any Japanese. He didn't know anyone apart from me and my family. The culture is so different. So yeah, it was a very difficult time for him. And also for me because I felt like I was sort of trapped in between two opposing cultures. So I could feel his struggle and I could understand his perspectives because I lived here and I lived in Europe before. So I could associate, I could relate to the Western cultural perspectives. But also at the same time, I grew up, obviously in Japan, so I could totally understand my parents' perspective. And sometimes the gap was too big. And I felt like I was in between. I was trying to bridge the both. But, when you are also readjusting to your culture, it's not very easy. Sometimes, like you have to prioritize yourself, but then sometimes it doesn't work. So it was a constant sort of struggle for the first half a year. But then we moved. We were actually living at my parents' place for the first half a year. Then we found a little place to rent about 30 minutes away from my parents' house. And then, I felt the situation became much better.
So tell me a bit about where you grew up.
I grew up in Nara, in a very little town. I grew up in quite a rural Nara area in Nara. So, but I think most of the people would think about deer and daibutsu and temple when you hear about Nara. So yeah, it's a very traditional place. It used to be a capital many years ago. Many years ago. So it's very traditional, but a bit less touristy. Well, not bit, quite much less touristy than Kyoto. I personally quite like Nara. It's quite small and relaxing. And where my parents live now, anyway, I spend lots of my childhood there because that's where my maternal grandparents lived. So I was very close to them. So that place is surrounded by deep green, mountain, river, rice field, veggie patches. So it's a beautiful, beautiful countryside.
So I guess in many ways it's kind of an old Japan, but very different from, a lot of Japanese would be brought up in big cities.
I would say it's very different. The land feels much wider. The landscape is very different from Australia, but you are exposed to so much more nature in countryside of Japan, and I find Japanese nature really beautiful.
So when you were at school, did you have any idea or dream of what you wanted to do in the future?
Yes, my mom had, so when I was little, my mom has this close friend, who lives in the US, and her husband's from Israel. So when they were back from the US to Japan, sometimes we would mingle together. And then my mom's friend, they had 3 kids. And the oldest boy was just 1 year younger than me. So when I was little, I had this occasional chance to play with him. We couldn't really communicate. He didn't speak Japanese. I didn't speak English at all. But I think that sort of experience, became important bits in me since then, subconsciously.
Okay.
It stayed with me. And when I entered junior high, I was already interested in other cultures, different cultures, races. I was fascinated. And then when I was in junior high, when I was 13, I had this opportunity to go to Seattle for about a week. It was on a homestay program, and our family friend was going to do it. So, I just kind of went along. And that was great. I was 13, young and vulnerable, but I was exposed to a totally different culture, like totally different mindset. The kids were wearing heavy makeup at school, and I went to public school, and no one was wearing makeup back then in Japan. And you eat food while you're taking class, which wasn't allowed at all in Japan. So those little things. So that taught me about, oh wow, there is actually a world which follows a totally different rule from what I follow.
Yeah.
And that opened up my eyes, maybe. I was very young, so it's all subconscious, I think. So I was always then interested in learning about different cultures.
Well, what do you think was the biggest gap between Australian and the Japanese way? What's the biggest thing to adjust to?
It's a good question. Makes me think. There are lots of differences, but I feel the way you communicate is very different. Mm-hmm. In Japan, people wouldn't say very clearly about what they think in many situations, I find. But in Australia, people are a bit more direct, and there is a bit more clear yes or no. In Japan, we have this, we've got this expression of kuki o yomu, means read the atmosphere, or we read the air, means you are supposed to guess what the other party is expecting or thinking or feeling and sensing. So there are lots of unspoken sort of communication happening in Japanese culture, and it's sort of expected. You're expected to understand. Yeah, something like that. But obviously, it doesn't work in other cultures. And especially if you're coming from a totally different culture, what you expect from the other party would be quite a different reality. So I think probably the communication is one of the biggest gaps, differences.
But one thing I was sort of told or taught about in Japan, that an important part of the Shinto aspect of Japanese culture is the idea of harmony. It's like that in the landscaping, and it's the principle for a lot of things, and that in social relations, that's the principle that social relations are based on. Is that sort of right, where you shouldn't make waves?
Yeah, you shouldn't make waves. That's a very good expression, I think. Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. I think you call it tall poppy here. Like we say, tall nail gets smashed in. So the popping out nail, so if you are the person who stands out, you get sort of, knocked down.
Okay.
Sort of pushed back in to fit in the homogeneous context. So I think probably many Japanese people who went out and came to different countries might experience that sort of freeing sensation, because in Japan you're expected to fit in. I think there is a lot of a quite strong expectation in the culture to fit in. But it's not about right or wrong, I find, because the harmony is very important. Yeah. The sense of community, and because it sort of, I think, makes you care as well. Like you're a bit, like you would be a bit more concerned about others in the community, because it's less individualistic there. But then again, sometimes it's hard to do what you want to do. Yeah. So you probably have to suppress what you really want to do, so you fit in. So there are always two sort of, opposing current going.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find, having been out of Japan for a while and then going back, that you were questioning some of the things that you had previously done?
Questioning.
Or that you saw them in some maybe customs or traditions in a different way?
Yeah, so when I go back to Japan, after spending 1 or 2 years abroad or different countries, I always face, how do you call it? counter cultural shock. Just visibly, I get always very surprised because we all look so similar to each other.
Oh, really?
We all, yeah. Like, many young people dye their hairs, but mainly we have, in general, quite dark hair.
Yeah.
The facial structure is sort of similar and a similar height. And yeah, but here, like, you see different races, international people.
Yeah.
And the height, the figure of people are so different. The body shapes, I meant, facial structures. So visibly, I always get sort of like, oh, wow, everyone looks the same. First a couple of days, I get shocked by the fact. And also how quiet people are in general in Japan. I think that surprises me as well whenever I come back to Japan from abroad, spending some time abroad. I feel like in public, people don't really express their opinions much.
Going back the other way, obviously you said you'd been to India before Australia, which I can't imagine there'd be somewhere more different from Japan. So was there much of a culture shock to be in Australia?
Yeah, it's because I lived in Europe. I spent close to half of my 20s in Europe.
Okay.
I was in Germany and England. So I was sort of familiar with the Western way of living. And I would say Australia has quite a similar attitudes to that life I was experiencing in Europe.
Yeah.
But in India was a whole different story. But I loved it.
Yeah.
People say you either, fall in love or not. With India, in Japan, people say that. But I absolutely loved it. Well, there are lots of challenges too. Like men stare at you, for example, in rural areas. And you sort of have to I was trying to look really tough, like,
Okay.
yeah, the way I spoke, the way I was acting, I felt like I was really not really nice person, but I kind of had to do that to feel okay and to feel I'm safe. But the whole sort of the wildness of the country, the earthiness, the people's eyes that shows the power of life, In Japan, everything is so organized, everything is so clean. So, sometimes I feel a little bit lifeless. Lots of electric voices, everywhere you go, in shopping center and everything. But in India, well, I think big cities would be a bit similar to those, but in rural areas, the wild, the rawness, do you call it?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, was so striking, and that's something I really loved it. It's so chaotic, and people are very direct to each other, but then it works. And I felt like I had a few quarrel with tuk-tuk drivers. But then it was so liberating because, you get angry and then they get angry and then you say whatever you want to say. They say whatever they want to say. And our languages are different, so we don't really understand. But, you understand our emotions each other. We're angry. And then you get to express that and then it passes. So, which is very different from Japan. You are meant to suppress your anger, which is considered to be a negative emotion or immature emotion to have. So the whole, the directness and being able to sort of express those feelings kind of on the spot was very liberating, and I loved it. And it taught me a lot as well. As someone who grew up in Japan, I still find small chit-chat challenging.
Yeah.
Like here, where, you enter the shop and or a cafe, people would ask you, how has your day been? And I used to think, why do I have to share my life to this person who I never met before?
I think that too. I hate it.
Okay.
I'll cut that bit out.
So, on one hand, I find it's nice because it loosens up.
Yeah.
So it opens up as well. But then at the same time, if for Japanese, having that sort of talk means a lot, I think. Like you're asked to open up and you're asked to share your life. And I do. I explain what I've done in the morning, and what I'm up to, because they ask me, so I explain what I'm up to. So there is a kind of already relationship forming for me, because in Japan doing this sort of chat is a bit more, I don't know, feels a bit more serious. Not really serious, but it's not too casual.
Yeah.
Because you don't really ask strangers about your life. But then, so I pay money, and then the next person is waiting in behind me. And then the shopkeeper goes, okay, bye, thanks, next please. So it makes me always feel, I thought I was becoming sort of, a little bit friends with you, and I shared my bits with you, and then now you are sort of cutting me off. But it's okay. It's just how it is here. And then people talk about their life very, fondly, easily. People don't mind sharing that bits, and then that's it. You let it go. But I had a similar chat with my Japanese friends here, and then they all have a quite similar experience to mine.
So what would happen in that same situation in Japan?
So when we went back to Japan and I lived there for 1.5 years, one of my job was working for a fair trade clothing company. So I was doing customer service, selling clothes. So there we had quite a few regular people, but because I was a newcomer, new staff member, so I was getting to know the regular customers. And then one day I had a really beautiful chat with this lady whose son lives in the US or Canada. So she could relate to me in that sense, as a mother of a kid who lives away from herself. So, and then we had a really beautiful chat quite in depth. But then there was a, slow sort of folding, and then, you sort of start greeting, and then sort of warm up. And then you share quite a bit. We actually shared quite a bit. That was really beautiful. And then there is always a very slow cool down session in Japanese conversation with strangers or with whoever you talk to, I find. It's just my personal experience. So you sort of know, okay, goodbye is coming now. So you are taking time to say goodbye. And then, yes, you separate. Yeah, so I find I usually am left with, after having that sort of communication with someone, I'm left with kind of, quite a, I don't know, warm gift or something in my heart I carry with myself somewhere. Yeah, so I think, coming back to this chit-chat conversation, the aspect I find challenging of the chit-chat is the separation, because there is no cool-down session, but it's always very spontaneous. Next customer is in. Okay, bye. So that's maybe what I find a bit challenging.
I mean, we've talked a bit about it already, but what would be some other of the bigger cultural differences between Japan and Australia, or maybe even Tasmania in particular?
Here I find independent and more individual, whereas in Japan, people are a bit more dependent on each other.
Yeah, so more of a collectivist mentality.
Yeah. I think so, in general. Yeah, I think it's probably quite an Asian thing. Yeah. I don't know, I can't really talk about other cultures, but the sense of group, sense of community is a bit more stronger there.
Jumping ahead and joining the threads, what then made you want to go to India?
So I went to India for the first time in 2015. By then, I lived in Germany. So I was an exchange student in Germany for 1 year when I was doing my BA in Japan. And after finishing my BA, I lived in Germany. I worked there for 9 months.
Whereabouts in Germany?
When I worked in Frankfurt for 9 months.
Okay.
It's quite a modern city with lots of tall buildings, banks. Lots of banks are there. Yeah. It's not really my favorite part of Germany, I think, but I really like Germany personally. There was a few years gap before I went to England to study. So before I went to India, I had a bit of experience of staying in European countries. And I really, really enjoyed it being in Europe. But I felt like I just wanted to experience something so different and much more raw, which I couldn't really maybe find either in Japan or nor in European countries. And then a few of my friends already had experience of traveling to India and spent some time there. And I was fascinated by their stories. So I started thinking about, one day I need to go to India. I really want to go to India. Yeah, so which I made it come true in 2015.
You're a dance movement psychotherapist. Is that the right thing? How did you get into that?
So I was working in Frankfurt for 9 months at a department store, Japanese department store's branch.
Okay.
So this department store had 3 branches back then in Germany, and I was allocated in a Frankfurt shop. And I thought I would really enjoy my experience there because I was, I got to be back in Germany where I really enjoyed my student life. But the work itself, doing customer service, selling expensive products, basically. The work itself, I didn't really quite enjoy. But then I came across one episode where I had to accompany this couple from Japan. So they were a part of this tour group, and the husband was quite sick. But they didn't speak any local language. So and then that time I was quite fluent in daily conversation German. So I got to go to pharmacy with them, and then I got to explain, the use of the medicine. So I was a translator, and the couple was really happy about what I've done, and I felt like I did something really meaningful, which this sense I couldn't really get in my work at this department store. And then that experience sort of stayed with me, and it made me feel like, I think this is more heart-filling, and I want to do something like this. So something more meaningful, some work that allows me to connect to people in a deeper level. And then that time I was also thinking about, it would be really great to get back to dancing again, because I always believed in the power of dance. So I wanted to do much more, like something related to dance. So, and then someone in Frankfurt told me about dance therapy that time, and it didn't really click with me back then. But then again, this field sort of stayed with me since then. And then after I went back to Japan, I started really looking into it. And I discovered there is a field called dance movement therapy or dance movement psychotherapy. And I found this university in London. So I decided to study there.
So that's what you were doing in your 2 years in London?
Yeah, I was taking the course to become dance movement therapist.
And what, I don't know, I only know a very small amount about dance therapy. Could you just tell us about what's the benefit of it, and how do you help people?
Yeah, so it's one of the expressive arts therapies. So there are drama therapy, arts therapy, music therapy, and dance movement therapy. And because I was interested in movement and dance, so I took on this path. So in dance movement therapy, our focus is our body, our natural body and body movements, which comes from within. So there is no set choreography or steps to follow at all. So you don't have to have any experience in dance at all or skills. Because in dance therapy, we believe that body and mind are one. They are very closely connected. So, whatever happens to your body affects your psyche and vice versa.
Yeah.
So dance movement therapy approaches through your body towards your psyche, because we believe that body actually tells so much more story about who you are. Your unconscious is sort of your unconscious finds a channel to express or to manifest through your body, whether it's a posture or movement patterns. Everyone has different postures, patterns, and movement habits, and so that's a access channel to one's mind, one's inner reality.
So are you practicing that here in?
So at the moment, I'm not doing the fully sort of psychotherapy sessions, which I'm really hoping to develop this year. But at the moment, I'm using that skill. I find I'm teaching, well, it's not really teaching, but I'm running the dance session at a organization for people with special needs. So I'm a dance tutor there. And also I've been involved in a local inclusive performance production. Now, so I'm a dance movement artist there. So I feel like I'm really relying on my knowledge or experience skill as a dance movement psychotherapist to do these works.
Because it's quite unusual thing to do for someone from Japan in particular. And what's one of the things that's been interesting, talking to a lot of the people I've talked to, are doing things here that they would probably not have done in their home country, but because they've gone, when you go abroad, you often have to do things in a different way, or you're starting something new. But I guess, so I guess that was the case with you. Would that be?
Yeah. So there is still no course available in Japan to be, like, for example, no MA course to do dance movement, to study dance movement therapy in Japan. So I think I wouldn't probably be able to take on that path if I was in Japan. And I think I agree with you. Like, I wouldn't have maybe thought of it either. Like, I wasn't really interested in becoming a therapist initially. I was more interested in becoming a dancer.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think this experience in Germany, taught me a lot about what I really wanted to do in life.
Yeah.
So I think it probably happened because I was in foreign countries and I was already maybe experiencing a challenge maybe.
Yeah.
In terms of my identity, cultural differences, all sorts of things you have to face when you're abroad. When you're out of your comfort zones. So all those experiences maybe together brought me to that path, probably. I don't know how it happened.